298-4023.
I'll let the Zoom people in. I think Bruce is on Zoom.
Oh, is he on Zoom?
There is a Bruce in the waiting room, so I'm assuming.
Oh, because he told me he wasn't gonna.
As we know, there is only one Bruce.
All right, so, Chris, I didn't hit the PA, but it's on. Okay.
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are you ready?
Yes,
Okay.
you're on.
Okay.
FPA.
Here comes
Good I just saw him. Good evening, everyone. On this wet and blustery evening, I would like to call the Economic Development Subcommittee and Steering Committee meeting for November 30th to order. It is time being 48. Tonight, let me read this, a note to residents. All citizens are welcome to attend a public board and committee meetings in person. Additionally, in an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or from Zoom. The meetings are also live streamed by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast 11 and Verizon Channel 29. The link to the access of the meeting is at the EDC Plus Steering Committee agenda, and you can open the Zoom link on that agenda, or you can call in at 1-929-205. That's 1-929-205-6099, and enter the meeting ID number 883-07-319132. That's 883-07-319132. Then press the pound number. Okay, we have with us in the chambers Councilor Sheridan, Councilor Frangillo, Councilor Jones, and Greg Rondo of the Planning Board. Is Bruce on Zoom? Because I can't see anybody right there.
He is.
Yeah.
Bruce Hunchard is on Zoom. Great. Beth, it could not make it tonight.
But I don't know if she's zooming in though.
I don't think she can zoom in, so. Yeah, I can't see if anybody's there. So Bruce, if you raise your hand, I won't be able to see you.
Just waving.
I'll just speak up then.
Everybody's like, yay! No,
No.
I'm only kidding. I think I heard you, Bruce.
Thanks.
There's someone else. Oh, Alan.
Is there somebody else there?
Looks like Alan. There you
All right, I think it's gonna start ramping up, so we'll just have, tonight we're gonna talk about the item on the agenda last meeting that we didn't get to really discuss at all, which was the inclusionary zoning bylaw. And really what it is it's about affordable housing for people that make lower than 80% of the median income here in Franklin. So, and a lot of all of the other municipalities around us already have this law, in their bylaw, but we're going to talk about it tonight and hopefully move this on to the full council to then go to the planning board, right, to discuss. So it's like the beginning of a long discussion. So I'm looking at the monitor in front of me and I can't see anybody, but I am going to have, Jamie, do I throw it to you, Jamie, first, or to Brian?
Sure.
Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think after the discussion at the last meeting, you're right, the group talked about the density issues, but I think the inclusionary zoning was also kind of intermingled into that. If folks want a breakdown of the bylaw for that's being proposed, I'd ask Brian maybe to come up and walk through a very brief overview of the goal of the inclusionary zoning bylaw and the main components. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Jamie. Brian?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Brian Sperner, Director of Planning and Community Development. Inclusionary zoning. What that would mean for this community, if passed as recommended here, is that any multifamily residential development that is being permitted would have to have at least 10% affordable housing. 10% of the units, and they have to be, they have to qualify for the state, SHI, which is the housing inventory. I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. It's been a rough week for me. I'm going through a lot. So the inclusionary units, housing units, they have to be go through the local initiative program, local action units, and they have to be specified. It goes through same as specified by the Commonwealth's Department of Housing and Community Development. So they're very specific requirements. You can't just say, well, this is going to be affordable, and a few years later it's not affordable. They are, unless otherwise noted, they would be in perpetuity. And this is for any, so what we would be doing is, if we did pass the other bylaw regulation, they would go hand in hand, the one on the density. So this would be for any development that is for 5 or more units. Okay, so if it was
Okay, so I'm just gonna.
I'm sorry, go for it.
It's okay. So last meeting, there was a confusion about, is it for, because in the bylaw it says 4 or more on applicability, any project in 1. It says 4 or more on the schedule 6. It did mention 5 or more on one of the versions that we got.
Correct.
And then we got a version that had 4, and then this time we didn't get the schedule table in the agenda, so we just,
We
I
wanna
think
just
most
keep
people just
everybody-
want to know what it.
Want to keep everybody guessing on it. Good.
So it was just like one of those things, we just wanted to clear that up. I
Right.
think that would
So-
probably be one of the easy things, like, so you said 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we have not updated the inclusionary zoning bylaw,
Yeah.
that wording there, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What we're proposing, for the reason, I'll tell you the reason in a minute, but is for any multifamily development with 5 or more housing units are required to address the affordable housing requirements in the new section 19551, which is inclusionary zoning bylaw. And the reason is, if it's only 10% of the housing units, 10% of, say, 4 units is less than half
Right.
of, so if you go into the inclusionary zoning, if it's 0.5 or more, then it's counted as a 1. So if it's, it would have to be at least at 5 units for it to count as 1. All right?
Yeah, because you
So
count up.
count up, if it
or-
gets to 0.5, it goes up. If
It
it's
goes to
0.4
1.
If it were 0.49, it would not count.
Goes 0.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. I think we all understand that.
Okay, so, so in general, that's where we're at. There are a variety of details in here for the amount of units, the timing on the timing on market rates and inclusionary units. So say you had a 50-unit apartment complex come in and, or say it was actually, apartment complexes are a little more difficult, but if you had a condominium complex where they were building certain amount of units at a time or whatever, there is you would have to go by the schedule here in section G on which, how many market rate units can be built before you get to the inclusionary units, things of that nature. So it tries to be fair with the developers, but at the same time, we don't want the last 10% of the units to be the inclusionary, because then, sometimes things happen and they don't get built. So we try to make sure that certain percentages go on.
Could I interrupt you for a second,
Yes.
just to clarify this? So while the builder is building these units, then they have to, when they get to 30%, then they have to have at least one
Correct.
affordable unit
Right. If
built.
somebody had, in the apartment complex scenario, it doesn't really work, obviously, unless it's separate buildings, of course. But if you had a condominium complex and you're building 10 4-unit developments, or whatever the case may be, once you built 30%, up to 30%, you can actually sell those units without them being inclusionary units in there. Once you get up to that point there, though, you have to at least have, then you go 10% of the affordables have to be done at the next step.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I think there is a provision for inclusionary housing units off-site in this bylaw. So as an alternative to the norm of having inclusionary zoning units, right on site with the regular units, the applicant can construct units of equivalent in an off-site location. And one of those things that happens is you have very, very expensive condominiums or something like that nature, and it's very difficult to have a $750,000 market rate and a $250,000 inclusionary in the same development. It can be very, very difficult. But all the requirements of the bylaw apply to on-site provision of the, so they apply to both on-site and off-site. Let me see if there's anything else might be interesting, but I think the preservation of inclusionary restrictions have to be on the affordable units, and it has to be in perpetuity. And I think those are the highlights in here. And I think that the one thing that I mentioned that we did talk at the last meeting about the housing density changes that we're recommending at the same time. The inclusionary zoning bylaw could be approved without doing that other regulation. However, I think there are reasons to do both of them, and one, of course, is the MBT communities and the other regulations that we're dealing with this time. So inclusionary bylaw is extremely important. I recommend we going forward as quick as you're comfortable with it. But having the other bylaw parallel at the same time would be ideal.
Okay, thank you, Brian, so much for that description and clarification tonight. I think Bruce is on Zoom. He's had his hand up the whole time we were talking, so I'm going to go to Bruce.
I didn't want you to miss me, man.
I can't miss you.
Am I free to go?
Go ahead, yeah.
All right, I want to follow up on a question that Greg Ronco and I asked last time. I'm looking in the memorandum here about the, you say it's only 10%, but yet if you're only building 4 units, it's 25%. If you're building 10 units, it's going to be 20%. If you're building 50 units, it might be 10%, which go to 5. I mean, which are we going to stand for? I mean, you'd be asking somebody that's building a small project for 4, and you want them to put an affordable in. I can understand you asking for it, but you're not giving them anything for it other than the right to build a 4-unit building. The other thing is you're saying you could build some off-site. If you had a 50 condo project that was selling for $750,000 a piece, does that mean that the guy could go downtown and build a 5 affordable or inclusionary zoning building with 5 affordable units in it. That's something else that's gotta be looked at too, because that's an out for somebody the way it's written. It doesn't say they all have to be the same, but, Greg brought it up last time, I did too. I actually found out, I read the thing again and I found out where it says, if you build 4 or more units, you gotta put 1 affordable in it. So that doesn't make any sense because that's 25%. If you're looking for people to develop in these areas downtown, you're asking for too much. The other thing I want to bring up under that, on the previous zoning issue was, I mentioned the 2,000 square feet, 1 unit for 2,000 square feet as opposed to 2,750. And I haven't heard anything about that, and I haven't seen that changed or even discussed. So those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. I think we already addressed the number 1 issue that you had, that it's not 4 or more, it's 5 or more units. They have
No,
to-
it's written as 4. He said 5,
Right.
you gotta do 1, but if you're building 6, then you're probably gonna have to build 2, which doesn't make any sense either. It all depends how you wanna add the numbers up. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's gotta be a little bit clearer.
Yeah. Can I-
Okay, all
I'd
right,
like to
we're gonna go to,
yeah.
we're gonna go to Brian.
I'd like to clarify on that.
Yeah.
So it is 5, the number we're dealing with, okay? So if you had 10% of 5 units is 0.5. So if you get to 0.5, you need to include an inclusionary unit. So if you had 6, 10% is 0.6, that's over 0.5, but so if you go all the way up to, 14?
15.
So, yeah.
14 's still
yeah,
1.
Right, so
Right.
Yeah.
before you get to that second unit, you have, so yes. So anything 5 or more have at least something in there, but most of the small stuff only have 1 affordable unit until you get up to the little bit bigger developments. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. If you have 30 units, you need to have 3 affordable units. So it's a lot different than we were talking about a couple of years ago when we were talking 25%.
Right.
And the reason, of course, is, I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the MBTA is saying no more than 10% affordables in the MBTA half-mile area, the MBTA zoning district, or whatever they want to call it. It would have been nice to give us the flexibility to decide for ourselves, but they're saying if you want to do, you have to have multifamily, but you can only have up to 10% affordables, the way it was written out now. All right, what else did we have that he was concerned about?
What about the off-site stuff, Brian? The off-site, if somebody built 10 projects, 10 units, can they build 3, got 2 off-site somewhere else?
Yeah. Now, I understand what you're saying, and if you look at the wording, it may not be perfect, we could change the wording a little bit if you'd like, but I think we're giving an option for the off-site. And if you had an apartment building, the hope is that the apartment building, everything's gonna be in there, right? All your affordables will be in the building itself. When you have condominiums and people are dealing with market rate, it can be very difficult to get those affordable units in the same area. Not impossible, because it's done with even 40Bs where you have a condominium complex and you have the affordables mixed in. Like we have a couple that were, one specifically right now that was just permitted as Bruce knows, that one there, it's, if those were a little bit more money and the developer decided that he can't put those affordables on the same site, then it gets to be, it's up to the town to decide whether this is appropriate. The planning board would approve the off-site location, and it would be, as the wording says, it's an integral element of the multifamily housing permit review and approval process. So if it looks like they're just trying to get away with something and giving you a real garbage, if you will, instead of giving a good quality product, then the planning board can turn that down and say, no, we cannot, that can't go there. We don't want to be overly restrictive, but you want to make sure that the planning board has the decision. to say, yes, that's appropriate location and appropriate units for the town. So, you did talk about the possibility of changing, Bruce brought this up a couple weeks ago, and again, going from 2750, which is a little more than 15 units per acre, to straight across 2,000, which is what's allowed now by right in the downtown commercial district, allowing all three zoning districts that would have multifamily by right, having them up to 2,000, have them all the same. Really, the only reason I'm thinking that we want to stick with the closer to 15 is that when you get a little bit farther out, away from the train stations and the downtown, allowing the 2,000, which is on one acre, is 22 now, 23 acre units of housing. It's really, allowing it by right doesn't give the planning board any, the ability to say, no, it's a little bit too dense there. Well, you say it's by right. If you go with the 15, which is the MBTA requirement, then we're meeting the needs of the state, we're meeting the needs of that regulation, and we're giving the planning board the ability to regulate anything above that size. That's the reason that we're proposing what we're proposing.
You can just clarify that we're not discussing that piece
That-
today?
That is correct. We are discussing the inclusionary zoning piece right now. Okay? I mean, I think we all have a lot of other things we want to add to that other density piece. So I'd like to keep this separate for now. I know it all goes hand in hand at the end of the day. We want all these things to go through and to be compliant, but I think we need to focus on what's on our agenda right now, because we have a lot of stuff we have to talk about. I want to know if anybody up here wants to speak, and then I know we have people in the audience who would like to say something. So I'm going to go with Councilor Frangillo and then Greg Rondo after, okay?
Cool.
Okay.
So, thank you. Thanks for doing all this. It's a lot of work, and I want to first express my support for the concept of inclusionary zoning as in terms of making sure that as we continue to grow as a community, that we have a healthy mix of income levels and diversity of people that are able to live here in Franklin. Often that means young professionals like me, as well as some of our elders, though not always. My fear with inclusionary zoning is that if set at the wrong level, then a project can become unfinanceable, and we end up with fewer homes, which is a worse outcome than just allowing all homes to be market rate, right? And studies have found this to be true, right? When set at the wrong level, when inclusionary zoning comes in, it just means that fewer homes ever get made. It drives the cost of every other home up because you've now driven the supply down. And so I want to make sure that we get this right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that we're producing units that are affordable for everyone to live in Franklin. And we don't want to put something in that just stalls development and drives rents up. So my question, I guess my first question would be how we arrived at this number, and if you believe, and maybe why you believe that a project is financeable at one affordable unit out of 5 to 14.
Jamie has his hand up, so I'm going to let him start to answer that question.
My hand was high. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the balancing act, Councilor Frangillo, I think, of when you see Dean Ave 117 station, you get 270 units in there. At 25%, 20%, some of the logic that you propose could certainly be true. Would that project have been done with a higher percentage or a higher cap, percentage of affordable units? Possibly. I can't predict that. It's all hypothetics. MBTA communities is killing our ability to do that and look at higher numbers, because within that zone of a half mile, really, we're now capped by state rule at 10%. I think even before that rule came out, which was kind of thrown a curveball recently about a month ago, the staff had already been talking about the 10% number. Why? If you look at other comparable, like another town, for example, maybe not comparables, but you look at a community like Framingham, just for an illustration, they do 1 out of every 10. And I think 10% is your thread, right? Everyone knows that number from Chapter 40B. Developers may get wary and a little nervous about 15, 20, 20% or other things like that. So, but going it below 10, it's a moot point. Why bother? And if you do the numbers, like I think you've done, at 22 units per acre, if the group went to that and said by right 22 units, you're really still only getting a couple units that are affordable. And with all due respect to the developers in the community and the builders, yeah, that to Bruce and other comments, I'm not saying that he's wrong, but I think it's the least a builder could do is take a complex of 22 units and say we're gonna still deed 2 of those affordable. Right now, we're the only town in this area that does not have any inclusionary zoning bylaw at all. So while I think at the end of the day, your comments are completely true, the 10% number is kind of just going right down the middle and saying this is a fair, reasonable percentage for any builder to build into their financial models. It will take, to your point a moment ago, I think some time for the development community or outside investors that aren't from Franklin, some time to acclimate to that 10% number. But I think we've seen in other communities is eventually after a certain amount of years, it just becomes part of doing business. Just like when we implemented the stretch code, 10 years or 8 years ago, there was yelling and screaming beyond belief. The room was packed with people. How dare the council think about doing this? And then 6 or 7 years later, it just became the new industry standard. So we've talked about this as a staff about going higher, having bonuses or this, that, or the other thing. And I think we all came back to the conclusion that in order for more global support among people who want higher percentages of affordable or no affordables, kind of like Bruce was pointing out a minute ago, 10% seems to be a reasonable number. I think we hopefully all can get consensus on.
So can I clarify that was helpful, and I agree with it all. My concern is not with the percentage.
Oh, okay.
My concern is rather, because I agree, right? And I think we all agree. Something like 117, where it's 200 units, they certainly could have afforded. They're taking such a margin off each unit that they certainly could have afforded to put in affordable, and that would be beneficial to the town. My fear is not with the percentage, but rather the number at which we start, the number of units, the size of building at which we start mandating that you build affordable. Because they're not developers, especially the sort of developers that we want to attract in Franklin, where they're local and they don't have limitless pockets. The only way that they're able to build a project is by going to the bank for a loan and saying, here's a profit that I'm looking to make, here's how much I'm going to have to pay in interest, and they have to make that project financeable. And so if 1 out of 5 units has to be affordable, that might not be able to they might not be able to make profit on that. If they can't make profit on it, it just never gets built. I don't know if the number is 1 in 5. I sense that it's much higher than that, but I'm wondering if we have any numbers or a better sense of where that point comes in.
Through you, Metro, we did talk a few years ago. I know Brian's gone through many iterations. That's Brian. At one point, we did talk about 9 and over. Mm-hmm. But then, what do you do between 3 and 9? And is the community comfortable with basically 0 to 8 or 0 to 9, or like Framingham, a 1 for 10 is an easy ratio to understand, right? At some point, a number has to just get chosen. And I think we can hypothesize about the fear of nothing being built or nothing. But the cost of inaction has essentially, for the town of Franklin, led to, for decades, nothing being built, nothing being deeded. And so I think there is a striking balance. I can't say that any one of us, including the planning department or any of the staff, have that perfect number. I think when we looked at the 3-family and thought that's a desirable kind of structure in downtown from a vantage point of visibility, a touch and a feel. Okay, let's do 3. We'll do the 3 families. You know, that seems to be doable. 4 and over, you're going to get maybe a tear down or 2. You're going to get a couple parcels merged. You might get some duplexes with 2 units on the bottom, 2 units on the top. That's 4. Is it reasonable for one of those 4, which in this bylaw wouldn't qualify, but let's say you did 5, or even if it was 6, 3, is 1 out of 6 reasonable? I don't know, but I think that what we're looking for is if there's a number that the EDC committee wants, we should just make an amendment, say, why don't we debate 8? Let's debate 7, 10. You know, I don't think we're all sitting here wedded that we've got the perfect bulletproof proposal, you know.
I want to allow others to jump in, so I'll make this my last comment for now. But I think that it doesn't have to be a complete, my sense is that it doesn't have to be a complete guessing game. Like, at the end of the day, it's just math, and, right, like, there's some amount that land cost, that building cost, and so there are inclusionary zoning calculators that we have developers in town, but there's some number, so I don't think that we have to completely guess. I get the sense that, okay, a developer is obviously going to, want to play it on the safe end, and we might not. And so there's going to be a little bit of wiggle room, but at some point it gets close. And I have a sense that it's much, much higher than 5. Yeah.
Maybe Bruce or some of the other folks. Greg, I don't want to point people out, but
I'm gonna
some
let
other
Greg
folks
go
can-
next.
Yeah.
Are you done with the floor there?
Done with the floor for now, yeah, thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna go to Greg, and then I'm gonna go to the audience after that.
Yeah, I just, through the chair, to Bruce's point, with off-site building, if they opt to take that route, would it be done simultaneously with the planning board, so you know what site you're getting, and they can work in conjunction, so you're not getting one site, and then all of a sudden, then they come to the planning board, and we say no for the particular reason, then we have a situation there that's not going to look good, so I think it should be done simultaneously, so we all know what we're going to see, if we can do it that way.
I think we'll let Brian answer that one.
That is a concept, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
and then the
We
planning
agree.
board gets to say yes or no to the off-site
Correct.
site,
Right.
correct?
Yep. And I just, one other quick question. This particular bylaw, is this very similar to our surrounding towns? Like, is this almost like a cookie cutter to theirs too? So you got a different guy coming from different towns, is this one very similar to the surrounding towns, or are we way off the charts with what we're doing?
From what I have seen in the research that we have done, is this is not extreme by any means. With the 10% affordable, there are some differences in some of the other communities, but this is,
Pretty much the same,
It's
though?
really the same general structure of the bylaw, the same general components in it, and they just take it whether you allow, it has to be 10%, or whether they start at 8 units, nothing under 8 units, or whatever the case. There are differences here and there. But in general, this is a easy to understand regulation, and it's not overly excessive compared to the other ones.
Thank you, Brian. I just had one more quick comment to Kobe's point. If everybody who sits in this room or is listening owns a piece of property, the town of Franklin always holds money in its value. So if a developer comes in and he wants to build a building, the numbers will work for him, because he knows he's gonna get his money back. Great school system, police department, fire department, everything, so the value's there.
Right.
He's willing to put a little bit more money on the table to make this happen. Town of Franklin's got some good base, so you gotta always remember that.
Yep.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I'm gonna go out to the audience. I see a hand raised. Want to come up and give us your name and address?
Hello there, Joe Halligan. I was actually on the planning board when all this came forward. I actually saved the day that night. This whole Affordable Housing Act and the inclusionary zoning was dead on arrival. Took me about an hour to get all my board members rallied together, and we had a unanimous vote to save that, which went along with the council vote, which went to the state, and I've read since that we've got our certificate of compliance, or whatever you want to call it. I just feel like I've been watching the meetings, I'm really involved in this. I believe we need affordable housing, inclusionary zoning. But I think the cart's in front of the horse. We're all talking great, it all looks good, it makes great headlines. But we have to assure it can be built. We need to know that a building can be built before we put this in place. We can put this in place, but the developer still can't build. And I'm going to give you just a slight example. I might touch on a couple of the things that were talked last week, but I promise it won't be long. So I did some homework all around the downtown. A lot of it's residential 5, close to the downtown, which is walkable to all the downtown. 95% of all the lots are non-conforming. You need 100 feet of frontage. So you'd have to go to the ZBA, get a special permit or variance. But I took 3 random homes, and we're basically a victim of our own success in Franklin because the home values are high. So it sounds nice, oh, a developer will just tear down 3 homes and build a house. Well, I took 4 random homes closest to Dean Ave, just small homes, not big lots, 6, 7, 8,000 square foot lots, and I took the assessed values. We know nobody in Franklin sells for the assessed value, they're all worth more, but I'll use the low figure. One was 453, one was 465, one was 340, one was 388,000. Together, I was able to accumulate 34,000 square feet at a cost of $1.6 million. That's prior to tear down construction. Small generic homes that would be beautiful for tear downs to be close to town. Where we're putting the cart in front of the horses, in residential 5, you can only use 35% of the land in residential 5. So out of 34,000 square feet of land, a developer is only going to be able to use 11,900 square feet to build a building and parking lot. He's paying $1.6 million for 11,000 square feet of land. It don't work. Now, you take the 11,000, I went through it all, and I used the old figure of 2,750 square feet. That would only allow you to get 12 units. I did the parking calcs, 18 parking spots, 3,000 square feet for the parking spot, another 2,500 for the 24-foot right-of-way to get in and out. It's 5,500 square feet. You get 6,400 square feet of building left, 3 stories, 12 units. Right now it's about $300 a square foot for tear down, engineering, permitting, building costs, everything. The total cost of a project like that, land and building, is $7,360,000 to the penny. You divide that up, a developer's cost is $613,000 a unit to be downtown to walk to the train. That's without profit, that's without a real estate, if you're selling. I totaled it all up, a little bit of profit on it, probably with the real estate fees is around $700,000 a unit you'd have to sell them for. Of course, that would be condos. Now you got condo fees and everything. If someone's lucky enough to put down $200,000, your mortgage, taxes, principal, interest and everything, insurance, you're talking $5,000 a month to live close to town. If it's an apartment complex, you got to get back 10% gross on the revenue you spend. That covers the taxes on it, maintenance, insurance, $5,000 a month for an apartment for a 1,500 square foot 2-bedroom unit. It don't work. I feel before we move any further, we should find out the formula that makes the building work. We have to work on setbacks, we have to work on coverage, because we can put this all in place, they're still going to have to go to the ZBA for variances and special permits. It's not going to make it any easier than it is now. As far as the square footage, 2,750, if you drop it to 1,000, I did that too. Someone comes in and wants to put in 34 units on 34,000 square feet. By the time you can use the 35% of the land, you only got parking, you get no building, because you have so many parking spots. I think there's a lot of homework, and I'm all for this. I believe we need inclusionary zoning, we need affordable. But we should look at the formulas, the figures, the land costs, so the developer can even entertain looking in this town to do this. To put all this on the plate now and get it all approved doesn't make the building feasible to build. And that's, again, we're a victim of our own success. If this was Fall River, Woonsocket, we can buy lots for $125,000, buy them up on a rundown street, you got a project. But we're in Franklin. like Greg said, we got a great town, we got everything here. You're not gonna buy these homes for free. And it basically comes down to, if I add another lot, you're talking $2 million an acre, that you can only use 35% of. We have to change those formulas to allow the buildings to work. Then, once we know the buildings can work, then we know where we can put the inclusionary zoning and add the 10% in, and give all these ideas to the developer. But the way it is now, it's making us look good in paper and in the papers and on the Observer that we're doing all this, but it's never gonna get built. And most of these units, guaranteed, have to be 3 stories in height. I cannot fathom a 3-story building on Dean Ave amongst those residential small lots without having this room full. We've seen what happened on 140 here in a commercial district. Imagine on a quiet Dean Road, it's not gonna work. I've also heard the 117 Dean Station mentioned, worked out to be a good product, but that was a 27-acre project. There's not 27 acres available within a half mile of downtown. That's a 1 in a million, should be off the plate and not talked about. We have to talk about what we have and what's available. I'd love to see this work. I'd love to be involved in some type of a committee that could study this to make it work. But the way the books and the bylaws are written right now, we're just dreaming. It's never gonna happen. And I wanna see it happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. I think the whole plan of this is to go to what you're talking about. I feel like that's the next step, is to talk about setbacks and lot sizes and parking, and we just have to start somewhere. So that's what we're doing here today. I'm glad you want it to work. So I think with your help, we could actually get it to work. So thank you for that.
Can I make just one last comment?
Okay,
Just
very
quick.
quickly.
Right now, we have 1 unit per 1,000 square feet.
Yes.
There's no one knocking down the doors. Still hard to do at 1,000. And I had this argument with the planning board once before. It all sounds good, 1 unit per 1,000 square feet. By the time you go to the planning board, which is the right way to go, and you do your setbacks and your parking and your landscaping, it naturally shrinks itself to work out where you could never get 44 units on 44,000 square feet. It's impossible, you can't do it, because of the parking, the setbacks, the impervious coverage. It's kind of like water in a glass. It self-levels itself out. And again, no one's knocking the doors down at 1,000. I think it'll just make it a little harder. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Brian may wanna.
Brian,
Can
do you want to
him-
respond?
Can I ask
Oh.
Joe a question? Chair?
Jamie, would you like to ask a question?
What's the setback and what's the parking requirement? Joe, I have to believe you know that probably pretty quickly.
I think it's 20 feet.
What would the setback and parking requirement then be?
I don't think it's so much of a problem with the setbacks. That could be a little helpful, but the coverage.
So what's the coverage percentage? Again, I'm cutting to the chase.
On residential
I have to
5.
believe you and others know what that means.
On residential 5.
Yep.
35%.
But what's the solution to the problem is what I'm
Well,
asking.
increase it.
To what?
To what?
Oh, I don't know. This is the committee.
50%, 70%? No, I'm just,
I don't know.
here's my point. Sorry, Madam Chair.
It's okay.
It's,
Go ahead.
We could study it to death. The longer we study everything, the harder it's going to be to get anything done ever. You're going to hear at the tax rate hearing in a couple hours, the tax rate's falling because the average property is going up 17%.
Right.
Greg and Joe are totally right. We're victims of our own success. That trend ain't changing. So you wait another year to study something, you're now behind the curve a whole nother year, and then we study it, we get to the master plan, that goes on for 18 months, we're another year and a half out. We're in 2026 before we even get anything on the books. So my urgency in my voice is trying to say to people who are in the room, the builders and developers who know their numbers, we've got the decision makers here, pick a percentage.
100%.
Pick a percentage.
100%, yes.
Right, so 100%, so so that's extremely dense, and that's right next door to each other, and you're gonna get the same NIMBYism that you have with everything. So
It's like the downtown.
there is no
It's like the downtown.
perfect, well, to Joe's point, and I think he's right. You do a proposal like this in R5, and you're gonna have all the abutters on a 3-story building. So in essence, no matter which road we go in the maze,
Yes.
we get to a point at which we can't move any further. And that's my big concern, is that no matter what we talk about, whether it's setbacks, we're just going into the maze and getting to another brick wall and telling ourselves we can't do anything. So I just feel like if it's 35% coverage, great. Like, we want to increase that. Nobody here is going to oppose. What is the number? 70%, 50%?
I
Thank
think, thank you, Jamie. So, I mean, I don't think it's not a secret that I think we should extend the downtown commercial zoning down to Chestnut Street. But that's not really why we're here tonight. We're here tonight to discuss the inclusionary zoning bylaw. We have about 15 minutes left. And so I'd like us to think about that and how it relates to these coverage and the setbacks, or maybe just what are your other thoughts about the bylaw that hasn't been covered yet? I know Kobe has his hand up. Kobe.
Well, I just think we can separate these two things. That inclusionary zoning is a weird one in that, yes, it gets to the profitability, but we're saying that all the other things are, can we build the types of buildings that we want? And I think that has a lot of work to do, and I'm excited to continue to do that work and do it urgently, as it's been said. And that's the sort of stuff where it's it's still about, can we get this project to actually be made, but it's also we want to make it, what's the most that we're willing to accept? What do we want that place to look like? And then, if they can get made within that, great. If they can't, we already said that we don't want those types of projects, right? Inclusionary zoning is saying, it sort of steps outside whether it can, there's a building of the type that we want or not, and saying, all right, if you have a building that's able to meet all the other zoning requirements, and you're offering a certain number of units, then we want a certain amount of them to be affordable. I think those can be separated in two different places. Now, on the inclusionary zoning piece, you still need to be able to make the profit, be able to pay back the bank, and do everything that needs to be done. Now, are the buildings that we want to be built able to be built right now? No, and we need to work on that. Assuming that they are, or those that already are, which there are still things being built, what is the appropriate number that says we're going to get more affordable units? Now, I think that if it's the way that it is being proposed now, my guess is we just would get nothing, right? Unless it's a super, super large project. I don't know where the number comes in. You just wouldn't get anything, right? We're not going to get a 6-unit place, because as soon as you have to put that affordable, you're just not going to be able to make the money back. So I'd like to be able to sit down with the developers and get to a number that says, these can be built. Assuming it meets all the other requirements, these can be built if offering affordable at X number of units. I have a sense that it's closer to 15, 20 than 5.
Brian. Greg just said Brian wanted to take that.
There's one point that I would like to make, in that all over the state, multifamily housing is being developed in a major, major way. And a lot of them, maybe a majority of them at this point, have affordable units in them. Mm-hmm. And I understand the math is important. A developer's not going to come here and break ground if they're not going to make any money. However, it's happening all over the state. So if we one thing about this town is we are built out in these specific zones that we're looking at. There is very little land available, right? And I think that if you expand what we're talking about into the residential floor, you're going to end up more than triple the amount of area that multifamily would be allowed, and that's also going to that's also going to get 3 or 4 times the amount of people to comment on it and say, well, I don't want it in my neighborhood. The only way to do this, other than what we're proposing, the only way to do this is to actually do a study neighborhood by neighborhood and say, okay, well, this neighborhood here could expand out, could get denser. This one over here, probably the units are, quite a few units already, it's really dense. Do we want to bother in that area? I mean, they were doing it the easy way for a couple reasons. One was MBTA communities. MAPC did their study, and they kept going back to those 3 districts that we're talking about now, okay? So if you go outside those and you expand the areas in which multifamily can be allowed, and I'm not saying that's what the town wants or needs, I'm saying that that's something that could happen. It's a totally different thing, and it's way down the road before you would ever get consensus, I think, on what to do in that area. So we're dealing with 3 relatively small districts. We can meet the MBTA requirements with those 3 districts. We can get the 10%, which is the maximum amount within the half mile of the zone that the state's going to allow, if you will. So I think that if you want affordables, you want inclusionary zoning, this is the minimum impact essentially in the town that you can actually have. That's where I'm at with this thing. I mean, I think it's good. It's a baseline. It's something we can start with. If down the road, a year from now, we're doing a really detailed study on setbacks in general residential 5, or we want the impervious coverage increased up to 50%, or whatever the case, that's great. Maybe we change other things. Maybe we can go back to the inclusionary and change a line in there that all of a sudden we find that there's a problem in that we don't like. I don't know which one it would be other than the number 4 or 5. But,
Or 8.
but I think if we push this, not push it through, but get it to the full council for discussion, and see what their thoughts are, and then if they say, okay, in general, this looks reasonable, send it to the planning board for a public hearing and start a process. Otherwise, you're not going to accomplish anything if we just keep, and I understand all of the different issues. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the planning world that are pushing for, for instance, Wachovia has a tendency to, less restrictions essentially in certain neighborhoods, and parking issues and setbacks and all the other things. I understand that, well, 100%. But I mean, there are people out there. Well, we don't want that. We're not Cambridge, or we're not this. We're not that. We are Franklin. We have to do what Franklin. It's right for this community, and sometimes it's hard to know. Sometimes you can't figure out exactly the right thing. So you say, okay, let's do this, and we can adjust later on. And I have no problem going forward with 5 more amendments to fix one problem. But in reality, I don't think an inclusionary zoning requiring 10% on affordables is a mistake. I really don't. And that's where my thoughts are on this. So, anyway.
Thank you, Brian. Coey's like looking at me like, one more. Let's see if Patrick, do you have any comments? Councilor Jones? Okay, okay, Colby. Councilor Frangillo,
I want
I'm
to
sorry.
reground. I feel like I might not be naming my point. I'm so in favor of affordable housing that the biggest fear to me is that we put in a number that doesn't allow, that creates houses that are less affordable, right? So I am, and I agree with the 10% number for a large enough space, including the one here, right? That was a 60, and they were able to make a profit and have that project go forward for 45
30?
units.
34.
34
32?
units.
32? Yeah, what if? 33.
33 units. And they were able to put in 10%. Was it
You tell us.
Was it 10% affordable?
Yeah, Greg was kind of
10% affordable. right? So all in favor of those, and they did that, essentially out of goodwill. But we want to make sure that just going forward, like that just should be an automatic. If you're coming in with something that big, you should be putting 10% away. I want to ground us in an example of a project. We could look at ones that have recently been built. A fairly positively received one with little, pitchforks in the audience, as has been said, was the Briller Allstate project downtown. That was, 7 units, 12 units, 12 units. That was a good project. If they had to have one of them be, at affordable price point, could that project have gone forward? And if that answer is no, then putting this rule ends up with a worse Franklin than not having the rule. A Depot Street Plaza. If we want to say, we want you guys to have apartments above it to support that, how many apartments would that be? 8 units? 9, 10, 12 units? And if we made them to affordable, that project might never happen. That's a worse Franklin than before. So my fear is not in the percentage. I want the affordable. I just want, where is it, when you say like, oh, these multifamily units are being built all over the state with affordable. Yes, but they're these large scale multifamily units that aren't the types of units that we want, right? Those are the types of units that are scaring people and people saying, oh, that's not the Franklin. The types of units that we want are those middle housing, are those 12 units, 7 units, 5 units, adding a little bit here, a 4-plex downtown or a 5-plex in a converted, Victorian mansion. We want to welcome those projects, and if we put in, are overly restrictive in where we start our inclusionary zoning, just where it starts, not how much, but where it starts at, then we'll just render those projects unfinanceable, and all we'll get is the types of projects that people are upset about. So I'd like just a little bit more time to come back and get the actual number, but if you want an actual number, I don't feel comfortable with it being at 5, but I would feel comfortable with it being at 20, 25, something that errs on the side of caution, if we really wanted to move something forward tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Frangillo. I just wanted to say a couple of things in response. I'm sure other people do, but there is a provision to do off-site affordable housing as well. So it might not be in those 12-unit condos, but it might have to be somewhere else, right? So, or there's 7-unit condos. And so I agree with you that what we want to see are these 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6-unit places, but we need to have at least 10% affordable. Do we start at 5? Do we start at 8? Do we start at 10? I feel like that is the question that we're trying to decide tonight. And maybe it would be up to the full council to decide that in a public hearing. So if we're all in agreement that we want inclusionary zoning, we want 10% affordable, because we have to stay above that line as well, so it protects all of Franklin and the planning board and the ZBA. So maybe we should just think like this would be a better thing for the whole council to decide, and then it can go to the planning board, and the planning board can have could adjust it as well. That's my thoughts. Jamie, Brian, is that cool? Is that okay? You guys okay with that? He's like,
I do what you guys tell me to do.
Councilor Jones has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I can't fit 4 units in my Victorian mansion, unfortunately.
Sorry, you have 5 kids.
Well, you'd be shocked how much you can fit in 1,500 square feet.
Right.
But I do agree with the opinion that this should definitely go to the full council for further discussion. I think has been as part of that discussion, and there's a lot of discussion. The one comment I'm just going to throw out for tonight, in Kobe, I agree with you 100%. But as a construction worker myself, having been in business and in development, and know what the cost is associated with something, we just need to make sure, like I think Joe probably pointed it out the best, is that we're we're rearranging the pieces so that A, it makes it affordable for the developers to develop it, but B, that gives us or gets us that portion where we have this portion of an inclusionary, in order to allow that affordable aspect of it too. So it's a game, and some pieces need rearranging. And I think it's,
There's a lot of pieces.
I think that this definitely should go to the full council. So what I'm gonna do is actually make a motion to move this discussion to the full council for further public input.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can I make a motion to amend?
Well, no,
Just to
'cause
some
we're-
higher number? But just
Well,
to-
we have to like
it's gotta go to
approve it
full
first,
council.
and then it goes to the council, and then we,
Okay.
Decision's not gonna
Alright.
be made tonight.
But yeah, we got other chances, okay.
okay? All in favor for sending this to the full council to then to be recommended to the planning board?
Aye.
Oh, Bruce is online,
He's,
so I'm gonna
I'm
have to do a
on,
roll
yeah.
call vote. Bruce?
There you go. Yes, gotta
Greg?
start somewhere.
yes.
Counselor Sheridan?
Yes.
Counselor Frangillo?
Yeah.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
And Chair says yes, so that's unanimous. We're going to move this forward to the full town council, and with that, I would accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Before you adjourn, Madam Chair,
Yes.
does that disband the Franklin for All Committee?
Does that disband the Franklin for All Committee?
Does it dissolve?
Does it dissolve?
Technically speaking, the group was supposed to adjourn after the choices were made. I did notice that there was some
we
excitement
liked
in
you
the
so
room. And so we'll take this one back and we'll talk about it and we'll let everybody know.
Bruce, I would say that I would love to have
Their input.
your input as well on the multifamily schedule that we've already looked at, so that we can continue that conversation next time. And thank you so much for your input.
Thank you.
Okay, so to adjourn, Bruce,
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Counselor Sheridan,
Yes.
Counselor Frangillo,
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Chair, yes. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everyone for